So, anyone else finished but I'm a cheerleader and immediately decided that they either wanted to be Graham Eaton or be with Graham Eaton, or is it just me? You might think I made a conscious decision to watch this movie in Pride Month because it's the quintessential lesbian teenage rom com, and to that I will say, yes, you are right. Kinda. Sorta. You see, I have never seen But I'm a Cheerleader, unfortunately. Now, I don't know if this would immediately get my queer card revoked, but that is the truth. This is the first time I've watched this movie, and honestly, I walked away from it with the realization that I really did miss out on the campy foundational experience of this movie that would have defined my childhood, or at least my teenage years. This, of course, meant that But I'm a Cheerleader became the absolutely perfect choice for this week's Romcom Gander Tuesday, even though today's a Thursday. Now, for those just finding my channel or who are just stumbling on this series for the first time, Romcom Gander Tuesday is a weekly video series I have on my channel whereby I pick a romcom from the late 80s to the mid 2010s. Often it's a rewatch. On rare occasions like this one, it can be a first time watch. Either way, I watch the film and analyze it to see how well it holds up years later, especially viewing them through my now adult and slightly more cynical lens. Spoiler alert, this movie made me so goddamn happy, even as an adult, so no cynicism here. Now, if this is your first time discovering the series, kindly note that I usually split these videos into three parts: the intro, which is what you're watching right now, the synopsis of the movie, and finally my thoughts. As such, I will have timestamps put in so you can navigate it as you so choose. Now, before I move on to the synopsis part of the video, I would like to say a big thank you to my lovely patrons and YouTube members whose support have been instrumental in helping me continue to make content, especially since I started doing this full time at the start of last year, which was the last time I was in paid employment. And a special shout out to Kat, Lena, Sherry, and Holly for their extra support. You get all the hearts and kisses to mwah. If you too would like to support me on Patreon or become a YouTube member to enjoy certain perks, maybe even get a shout out, the link to do so is in the description bar. And with that said, But I'm a Cheerleader starts by introducing us to the character of Megan Bloomfield, played by Natasha Lyonne, who is, you guessed it, a cheerleader. She's charming and bubbly and a bit innocent and naive in her characterization, and is at the moment dating football player Jared. Jared, who kisses her like he's about to swallow her whole ass head, a situation that we can guess Megan is not that into, and we see her being very disinterested in the making out sessions in Jared's car. His tongue, ugh. To make things even more interesting, Megan finds herself daydreaming about the bodies of her fellow cheerleaders as she kisses Jared, and that is how she braces herself for the makeout session. After they are done, she heads home and we see her having dinner with her parents and get confirmation that she's an only child. We also see the quick side glances that her father sends her way when he's saying grace and praying for normalcy, which already gives us hints about how Megan's parents perceive her sexuality and is a great foreshadowing for what is coming. What is coming, it turns out, is RuPaul's Mike showing up to Megan's parents' home to inform them, as someone who was once a gay, their choice for Megan is a good one. If your brain immediately started screaming, oh shit, they are talking about conversion therapy, aren't they? You would be right. Megan in school notices that her friends and her boyfriend are acting extra strange, and she finds out that she isn't reading too much into it, and they really were acting strange when she gets home and walks into an intervention from her parents, her boyfriend, and her friends, who inform Megan that she's a lesbian to her surprise. She tries to deny it, but they explain that her collection of posters featuring hot women and hot female musicians, plus her art that is invocative of the vulva and her turn to vegetarianism, all scream that she is a lesbian. And thus, Megan's parents bundle her into the car and drive her to the New Directions camp run by Kathy Moriarty's Mary Brown, leaving Megan behind as they tell her to follow through with the camp's 5 steps program so she can return home normal, i.e., heterosexual. The camp aims to accomplish this by forcing its teenage attendees into performing gender associated tasks with the goal of finding whatsoever is at the core of their homosexual desires and tendencies, with the aim of eventually fixing it. Now, Megan is still insistent that she's most certainly not a lesbian, a stance that Mary doesn't buy into, and neither do her roommates Hilary and Graham. Graham, who is played by Clea DuVall, is more mask presenting and is very open about her being a lesbian and liking women and hating being at the New Directions camp. In one of their sessions, Megan is prompted by the rest of the group who guide her to the realization that she too is a homosexual. As she breaks down in tears, they congratulate her on having successfully completed the first step. Now that she's admitted the truth to herself, Megan throws herself wholeheartedly into the teaching since her Christian and small town upbringing has meant that she wants to cure herself of her homosexuality. However, her ardent attempts don't gel well with Graham, who scoffs at everything, including Megan's love for cheerleading, as she keeps pushing Megan's buttons. Graham, it turns out, is at New Directions because her stepmother caught her having sex with another girl in her room and told her father, who then shipped her to the camp with the insistence that Graham straighten herself out, otherwise is taking away her trust fund, the money that had been set aside for her college tuition, and even the car that was promised. Still present in the camp is Rock, Mary's very obviously gay son, who poses no little small challenge to the gay teenage boys present and even to Mike, who cannot hide his thirst for him. Megan, though, continues to work hard at the teachings, but she slowly begins to start an unlikely friendship with Graham. As one would expect from a camp that has teenagers rooming with other teenagers that they are most certainly going to find themselves attracted to, Megan stumbles on two of the boys, Dolph and Clayton, making out. Being the dramatic oversharer that her ass is, she screams, which brings Mary running, and she then proceeds to break the cardinal rule by informing Mary that Dolph and Clayton were kissing. Gods, I wanted to shake her in that scene. This in turn has Mary kicking Dolph out of the house and out of the program, not to his parents' house, mind you, since all the parents are unanimous in their stance that the only way they will accept their kids back is if they come back heterosexual. Clayton, on the other hand, is locked up for a week in a literal doghouse. Megan is shunned by the others, but Graham cheers her up to help mitigate the sting of it, and she eventually invites Megan out with the others to go have fun. Fun, it turns out, is at a local gay bar, and the teens from New Directions are brought there by two older ex gay men, Larry and Lloyd, who are partners and also ex-New Directions campers who decided that Mary's ideology and attempt at converting them can get fucked. And also, they provide an alternative for these kids that encourages them to be their true selves. At the bar, Megan gets jealous when she sees Sinead dancing closely and touching Graham, and when she leaves, Graham follows after her, and the two of them kiss, which in turn officially kicks off their arc as a couple. Sinead, who sees them kissing, is very obviously jealous but says nothing, and the teens all return to the camp. But Mary spots the bar cocksuckers paraphernalia beneath Graham's bed and brings the kids to picket Larry and Lloyd's house, hurling homophobic slurs at them. Megan, though, is very obviously uncomfortable and her heart isn't in it, but Graham doesn't hold back as she tells Megan that this is the best way to make sure that they are able to continue to hide in plain sight. And so she and Megan pretend a lot. Several nights later, just before their final step before graduation, Graham and Megan leave the others in their shared bedroom and sneak off to go have sex for Megan's first time. It is beautiful and soft and romantic and sensual and everything Megan hoped for. But when she wakes up, it is to find Mary screaming in her face. Turns out that Sinead had caught them and pulled the same stunt Megan had done before with Dolph and Clayton, i.e., she went to blab to Mary. Mary in turn gave Megan a chance if she agrees to follow through on the last step and participate in the stimulated intercourse session with Mary's son Rock, then Mary will let Megan graduate. If not, she would be out of the program. Megan does not budge and stands by her grounds and is thus kicked out. Graham, though, who doesn't want to be disinherited by her father, chooses instead to stay and is thus partnered with Rock. Megan, who has nowhere else to go, heads to Larry and Lloyd's home, who welcome her in, and she finds Dolph there, as he too had been taken in by the two men. With graduation fast approaching, Megan suggests that she and Dolph head over to go rescue Graham and Clayton. And so, on the day of the New Direction campus graduation, Megan and Dolph sneak in to grab their significant others. Clayton immediately leaves with Dolph, but Graham declines Megan's invitation. Megan, though unwilling to give up on the girl she loves, dresses up in her cheerleading outfit, grabs her pom poms, and does a cheer routine to declare her love for Graham before the aggrieved and irritated eyes of Mary and the parents of the teenagers present for the graduation ceremony. After she's done with the cheer, she runs back to the truck to join Dolph and Clayton, but is then delighted when Graham runs after her and joins her at the back of the truck, where the two of them then proceed to kiss. As the end credits roll, we see Megan's parents at a parents and friends of lesbians and gays meeting, where it is hinted that they are doing so for the sake of reconnecting with their daughter. The end. Like I stated at the start of the video, I am unfortunately the queer girl raised in the 90s who never got around to watching But I Am a Cheerleader when it was released. It came out in that brief period of time for me when my parents or when my family was right in the middle of moving and settling in, what with my mom recently getting married to my stepfather. So I totally missed the release date, and the friends I had at that point in my life were not really movie buffs. So I had no one to really point me to it as a new release. Now, before you give a shocked gasp, but how could you not have heard at all? Please remember, the internet as we know it today wasn't a household based service in the late 90s. And I remember that I did not join any chat rooms until, say, 2002, 2003, starting with a Yahoo chat room and some weird ass old dude who snuck in and was asking us to take off our clothes in chat, even though we were teenagers. People have always been weird on the World Wide Web. But sorry, I digressed. As I was saying, I missed out on the time when I should have noticed. And by the time I started hearing about But I'm a Cheerleader, I kept telling myself that I will get around to watching it eventually. And although it took over 2 decades for me to fulfill that promise to myself, I finally did it. Yay! And it's more than lived up to the hype for me. But I'm a Cheerleader is a fun, campy ride that is a satirical take on conversion therapy with humor to balance out such a heavy topic, while still weaving a romance into a story about queer identity and learning to come to terms with who you really are. Now, late last year, I'd done a video about Queen Latifah's Last Holiday, a movie that I stated didn't need the romance that had been written into it, since it was about Queen Latifah's Georgia Bird finding herself and a new lease on life. And I believed that a romance was unnecessary since it took away from Georgia's growth as a character in that movie. Now, for a brief moment as I was watching But I Am a Cheerleader, I wondered if the same would apply to Natasha Lyonne's Megan Bloomfield. Thankfully, that wasn't the case, because ultimately, this is a movie about gay people, queer teenagers who are just trying to strive for a normalcy that had been forced onto them by parental figures and peers, whose claim is that they love them, but whose love is conditional on exactly how well they fit into a heterosexual patriarchal system, which ultimately means that they tie who these teenagers love, not just how they act, to who they fundamentally perceive them to be, and punish or embrace them as a result. As such, Megan not just finding herself, but also finding love is important in equal measure for her story, even more so when it's set within the perfectly satirical framework of the movie itself. And of course, this doesn't just apply to Megan, but to most, if not all, the queer teenagers that we get to meet in the film, which, like I state in the thumbnail, uses satire to, yes, drive home its message about the ills of conversion therapy and how ultimately it's a flawed practice, because you can't really change who you are. You just instead have to either live bold and free or mask in order to survive. But either way, you're still going to be who you are. And whilst the film itself does portray the first option as the ideal, I really do appreciate how it doesn't denigrate or demonize the second one either. We all have to walk our own path. And as Lloyd tells Megan, there's no one way to be gay when you think about it. And this is something that reflects across the entire movie from its very opening sequence. Megan, who falls within the traditional expectations of a girl who is young, who is white, who is blonde, who is attractive, a cheerleader who is going steady with the high school footballer. She's the quintessential young lady who is meant to tick the heteronormative boxes. But then we get the glimpse beyond that. Her boyfriend, Jared, kisses like he's about to swallow her entire face. It was giving Dominic Sherwood in Shadowhunters, if you know, you know. And all that kept ringing in my head was Santana singing Charity Mouth in Glee once again, if you know, you know. But as Jared kisses Megan like he's trying to devour her whole, but in a very distinctly not sexy way, the hilarity in that moment of the kiss and Megan's mind choosing instead to flash to images of cheerleaders' bodies moving and diving in the air, something that she finds stimulating, is what takes her mind off of things. And it's such a great commentary on the performance of heterosexual desire by queer folks forced into pretending that they are actively participating in the act when they would literally rather be anywhere but there. And this already sets the stage for more of what is to come, a funny, hilarious, and romantic commentary on what it means to be gay and trying to find a way to make it through and survive, but also what it looks like and what appearance it takes on. Because I repeat, not everybody is gay in the exact same way. I found it hilarious that you had Megan's family and friends determine that even though she's quintessentially what would effectively be seen as straight passing, very firm cheerleader with the athlete boyfriend to boot, that still isn't enough for them. They raid her personal space, assign her orientation based off of what she had decorated her room and locker with. Now, did I also have posters of Angelina Jolie everywhere in my room when I was growing up? Yes, I did. I had a Lara Croft poster up. I'd watched Gia as a child, and even though it was a heartbreakingly painful film, I still had that poster of her because she was stunning in that movie. That and Girl Interrupted because it had the double combo of Angelina Jolie and Winona Ryder, and I was obsessed. So, yes, I covered my personal space with images of beautiful women and also anime and video game characters. But like Megan, I didn't immediately clock that as that having made me not straight, even though the number of times I watched Lucy Liu in that black leather skirt in Charlie's Angels should have given me a clue, or Demi Moore's bikini shot with a gun in Charlie's Angels Full Throttle. Never seen a girl like you before. Sorry, I'm getting distracted again. Megan having posters of women up on her wall wasn't meant to automatically label her a lesbian. She could have just enjoyed those films and liked being surrounded by strong, powerful women. That she is a lesbian is besides the point. Instead, we're meant to acknowledge the sheer hilarity of pigeonholing others based on a stereotype about our perception of what a gay person looks like or should act like. It is why, for example, the scene with Jan, who is more mask presenting, and as such, her objections to RuPaul's Mike that she's not a lesbian and is very much straight went over his head because, once again, it's a satirical poking at a system that deigns itself the best judge of what sexuality looks like, and that perception is often flawed. It is why the core of the romance being that Megan, who probably, and keyword here being probably, might never have really had the space or the chance to come to the realization about her sexuality, what with them being in a very small town and her not having given any indication that she had plans to go to a liberal college, she might never have discovered the truth of herself. By forcing her to go to true directions, however, her family and friends inadvertently pointed her to the true direction of her life and desires, and hilariously set things in motion to lead her not only to admitting that she is a homosexual, but also she finds herself a girlfriend as well, which was awesome. Because god damn it, Claire DuVall as Graham was so fucking hot. Another reason why I'm actually pissed that I did not see this movie as a teen, because if I had, so many things would have been immediately clear with regards my orientation and type much earlier. But back to the point about how But I'm a Cheerleader uses satire to mock certain biases society holds and also challenge our expectations, because I found it absolutely delightful that the core resolution for the movie with Megan and Graham and the choice to leave true directions and be true to who they are is one that rests heavily on Megan, she who is more femme presenting and who is the one that came to true directions without the knowledge or acceptance of her identity until she got there. She who ideally it would have been much easier for her to pretend with Cole. Sorry, I meant Rock. What can I say? Sunset Beach was my childhood, damn it. Anyway, Megan would have been a much better fit to pretend at normalcy with Rock. To have her be the one who rejected that while still maintaining her femininity is such a great subversion. I actually found myself laughing at myself because I'd thought of the two of them. Graham, who had consistently been shown as being the more rebellious of the two, will be the one to stand up to Mary Brown and reject the stimulated heterosexual coupling test that was to precede their graduation as a final way to attest that they had learned and been fully reconditioned to fit their parents and society's demands of them. And yet, it is Graham who falls in line and Megan instead who rebels. Sweet, innocent, beautiful Megan. And yet, even with her rebellion, she cannot just walk away from the one girl who owns her art, the girl who was so crucial in her journey to finding herself and becoming comfortable in her sexuality. And so she and Zuko, sorry, I meant Dolph. She and Dolph return, both to get their partners. Once again, the choice to have them both dressed in camouflage is such a funny one because whilst you are laughing at these two dramatic choice to signify their covert operation of rescuing the ones they love reflected in their outfit choice, it's also still a nice touch to transform Megan, who's always been in dresses with light colors, and Dolph, who is more effeminate in this more serious dour colors that is then play acting at a rescue operation, one that Dolph succeeds at, but Megan fails. However, she doesn't give up and chooses instead to lose the camel and step into her cheerleading outfit, something that is utterly feminine and utterly hers, her most true and comfortable self, and acknowledge that yes, she is a cheerleader and she's also very gay. And I found it a deliberate choice in the story to have that be when Graham is then convinced to come with her. Megan does her chair and leaves, and Graham comes running after her, and the two kiss at the back of the truck. It's fucking brilliant work. Applause. No notes. It had me grinning like a loon at the end. But like I stated earlier, this is a film that explores how gay people survive in a world that would rather see us broken or shaped to suit its own desires. Some folks like Megan and Graham, Dolph and Clayton, hell, even Larry and Lloyd, and the other New Directions escapees who leave Mary Brown and her prejudices behind, all make the active choice to live loud and proud in their truth, banding together to create their own chosen families, what with the rejection of their biological families who have turned them away because they refuse to live a lie or pretend to be someone that they are not. Except for Megan's parents, of course, who we get to see a snippet of at the end that confirms that they are doing their best to understand her better and are actively working to let go of their biases so they can hopefully be present in their daughter's life. But what about the others? Sinead and Hilary, Joel and Jan and Rock, who chose to stay and follow through to graduation? Does their choice make them any less gay? No. Even though, unlike Megan and Graham and Dolph and Clayton, who live and choose to live their truth, they instead chose to stay, to hide. And for them, that is the choice they choose to make in order to survive, to get through, to not lose their support system. It's still a valid choice to me, even though it might not have been the happiest one. And it's a great way to further drive home the point that they aren't really changed, they have just masked effectively for survival. And who better represents how they would then navigate the world other than RuPaul's Mike, who I swear is one rock shaped temptation away from absolutely changing his tune from I too was once a gay to I too am back a gay. Like, let us be real. Rock is absolutely backsliding in like the next couple of weeks, and Mike is going to be right there, staring temptation in the face, in the abs, in the junk. There is only a little bit longer that I can attempt to resist that particular temptation. Of course, a part of me, based off of Mary Brown's excessive reaction and desire to stomp out every ounce of queerness to be found in her charges and her son, a part of me wonders if I'm the only one who is picking up on Mary herself having once identified most likely as an homosexual, and thus her self loathing and internalized homophobia, her desperation to course correct is maybe what led to her starting New Directions. Because her conversation with Larry and Lloyd when she shows up at their halfway house with the rest of her charges, holding homophobic signs and being absolute shitheads, hints at that. And a part of me worries that some of her charges, the ones that graduated, might follow her path in maintaining the system, which is heartbreaking when you take the time to think about it. We becoming the very same oppressors that beat their prejudices and ideals into us. But hey, at least some of them got out and some of them found happiness and their happy ending. And I don't know about you, but that makes me practically giddy and ecstatic. But of course, these are all just my thoughts. I would, as always, love to hear yours. Whether or not you agree with me, please share them in the comments. Like this video, as always, if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet, but enjoyed anything of what I had to say, share it so others can find my channels as well. Or you can check out my gaming or ASMR channels if they sound like something you might possibly be interested in. I have them both linked in the description bar. I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.